Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A lot of moves have been made in the transfer portal over the last 2.5 weeks. I want to hop on and talk about my three winners of the spring transfer portal window and my three losers as well. And I think a prerequisite to this conversation is the transfer portal is nowhere near over. Just because you can't enter in the transfer portal anymore, there are still a lot of big names that haven't found landing spots in this transfer portal window. So this list is subject to change, but I thought it'd be a good idea to highlight some teams that I think got a lot better in the spring transfer portal window and some teams that I thought really didn't have a great last 2.5 weeks. Excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It has really been a blast covering the transfer portal over the last 2.5 weeks. The amount of support you guys have all shown the boys truly does mean a lot. One, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. If I'm sleeping on some teams that you think made some really good moves, would love to hear from you guys. Let it fly in the comment section. That's really what it's all about. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with a team that had a massive win late Thursday night. That is the Oklahoma Sooners. And you look at Oklahoma and what they've done in the spring transfer portal window. They've landed three guys all along the line of scrimmage that I think are going to be difference makers for the Sooners heading into 2024. And why I want to talk about them first is you look at Oklahoma heading into the SEC. Brent Venables has made it very clear that he wants to make sure the line of scrimmage play is going to be ready to go in that conference. We all know the SEC conference, it's a line of scrimmage league. And Oklahoma, I think, has done a really good job. And a lot of times when you're evaluating transfer portal classes, a lot of times you just go to the quantity of players that you brought in. I mean, Oklahoma didn't need to bring in 10, 15 guys in the spring transfer portal window. That roster was already in a really good spot. They really focused on the quality of players. You look at a guy like Dominic Williams, a lot of people's number one interior defensive lineman in the portal. They go out and beat out Missouri, LSU, Texas for Dominic Williams, a true difference maker on the inside of that defensive line. You look at Jermaine Lolea, a guy that I think I am much higher on than kind of the national media consensus. You get a healthy Jermaine Lolea. You get the version of Jermaine Lolea that was at Arizona State. That's also a difference maker on the inside of that Oklahoma defensive line. And that was, kind of a position group that we talked about probably could afford to get some veteran depth in it. That's exactly what Brent Venables did. And then you talk about a guy like Branson Hickman, who has been one of the better interior offensive linemen at that center spot for SMU over the last couple of years. Whether he starts or not, he is going to provide another body that Oklahoma feels really good about on that offensive line. We talk about it all the time. You got to go into a season with 7, 8, 9 guys that you feel good about on the offensive line. Branson Hickman certainly is added to that list of guys that you trust on that Oklahoma offensive line. Didn't lose too many players, right? You're talking about Josiah Wagner. That one kind of stung, but that's a really loaded cornerback room. And so you're looking at Oklahoma, didn't necessarily add 15 players, but they added 3 really good players and didn't have that much attrition in terms of impact guys heading into 2024. In my mind, a big-time winner. The next program I want to talk about, and arguably the team that has really transfer portal in the spring, that's the Miami Hurricanes, right? And again, you had some attrition, right? Guys like Jaden Wayne, Nigel Lee Kelly, Jared Harrison Hunt, those guys were all really solid players for Miami, but I think to an extent, they kind of just got squeezed out because of how good that defensive line is for the Hurricanes. And you take a look at what they added. You start with Damian Martinez, kind of, I would say, the crown jewel of this spring transfer portal window. Miami wanted to add a veteran running back that was a game changer. There wasn't any other better running back than Damian Martinez, but then you go to some other positions that we kind of talked about you'd like to see Miami address, that boundary wide receiver that can be a difference maker on the edge. I mean, Sam Brown coming from Houston, a guy that caught for over 800 yards at Houston, certainly could be a guy that's an 1,000-yard catcher for the Miami Hurricanes, and particularly that kind of wide receiver the Miami Hurricanes really wanted. You had some really nice veteran depth with a guy like Jalen Alderman and Donnie Hill. That was probably another question that we had for the Miami Hurricanes. You bring him over from Marshall to kind of just bolster up that cornerback room. I think Miami, again, didn't bring in 15 plus guys like some other programs have. That being said, the quality of player they brought in was really, really good. But more importantly, they kind of fit the positions that they needed to address. And that's another thing that I really look at in the transfer portal. You see some programs just add, right? And it doesn't matter. They just want to add guys. I don't necessarily agree with that tactic. If you're using the transfer portal, you want to bring in quality players, but more importantly, quality players at the positions that you want to address, right? And so the Miami Hurricanes, I think, looked at their roster and said, all right, we have question marks about a few positions. They went out and addressed those problems or question marks in the transfer portal. That's exactly how I really think the transfer portal should be used. Last winter for me, and a team that we're going to be talking about a lot in the summer, is UCF. I think they did an absolutely phenomenal job. You talk about Sheldon Arnold, one of the more coveted safeties in the transfer portal, was an FCS All-American. Penny Boone, one of the more coveted running backs, and more importantly, a perfect fit into that Gus Malzahn offense. Penny Boone, RJ Harvey, KJ Jefferson, that is going to be an absolute trio in the backfield. Ja'Kurrie Brown, I think, solidifying kind of the future of that quarterback room. And then a guy like Traquan Fagans, who has played some solid football for USC in 2023, a nice addition to the back end of that UCF defense. I look at this UCF team and say that Big 12 is wide open. Yes, you have some favorites, Utah, Kansas State. UCF's ability to run the football is going to give a lot of teams in the Big 12 a lot of problems. And when you have the ability to run the football, control the time of possession like UCF might be able to do in 2024, that is going to be a team that you're really reckoning with in the Big 12. Now, getting into the losers, I think the first team that I want to talk about personally is probably LSU. And I think a lot of LSU fans would agree, right? They didn't have that many positions that they needed to address, but the interior of that defensive line was a priority. And they really pushed their chips in for guys like Dominic Williams and a guy like Simeon Barrow Jr. And as we sit right now, Dominic Williams just commits to Oklahoma. Simeon Barrow Jr. sounds like he's going to the Miami Hurricanes. I mean, I think for lack of better terms, LSU just has whiffed on some of their top targets. And you look at LSU, they had really one job to address in the transfer portal, and they haven't really done that yet. Now it's early. There are still some names on the inside of that defensive line that are still looking for landing spots. So this could change for LSU, but I don't think a lot of LSU fans are sitting there and saying, all right, we got better in the transfer portal over the last 2.5 weeks, because they haven't even brought anybody in. And then you take a look at another program that we've talked a lot about. That's the USC Trojans. Now, I think they made some really good additions, right? Talk about Greedy Vance Jr. I think a very, very good nickel for USC heading into 2024. That secondary looks to be really good. Very similar to LSU. We had a lot of question marks about the depth and talent on the inside of that defensive line. They went after Derek Harmon pretty good. They didn't get a chance to get Jermaine Lole on campus. The main goal for USC was to land a guy on the inside of that defensive line. They haven't yet. Again, Derek Harmon still waiting on his decision. Now, USC lands Derek Harmon. You might put them into the winner category during the transfer portal, but as of right now, USC, they brought in some good players, right? Jay Fair, I'm a big fan of Auburn. Greedy Vance Jr., another guy that I like a lot, but the positions you wanted to see them address, they haven't necessarily addressed it yet, and they lost a guy in Jason Zandamela, who I think might be one of the better centers in the country over the next couple of years. I think a lot of USC fans would agree as we sit right now, certainly not a winner in the transfer portal. Last team I want to talk about as a loser, and again, this is really subject to change for Michigan State because they're having a lot of guys on campus. That's Michigan State, right? You look at Ed Woods from Arizona State, really like him. We broke him down. K'Ron Lynch-Adams, a guy that Ohio State wanted in the portal as well. You have a nice addition at running back. We wanted to see Michigan State address the line of scrimmage. They landed Brandon Lane. He ends up decommitting from Michigan State. Sounded like a mutual parting ways. I'm worried about Michigan State along the line of scrimmage. And I know Jonathan Smith will get it right. That's how Jonathan Smith does things. You look back at the success he had at Oregon State, it was along the line of scrimmage. You look 3 years down the road, and I mean, Michigan State, is going to be a team that's very good along the line of scrimmage. But heading into 2024, you have some massive question marks. You lost some guys on the offensive line that had starting experience in Gino Vandermark, Ethan Boyd. But you lose guys like Derek Harmon, Simeon Barrow Jr. It's hard to sit here and say Michigan State has won the spring transfer portal window, but both USC and Michigan State are two teams that I think they're going to add some names. I think this might change over the next couple of weeks, but during our check-in right now, certainly not a winner in this transfer portal window. Another couple teams I want to shout out, Auburn. I think Auburn has done a phenomenal job. And again, it's not the flashy commitments, but Keandre Lambert-Smith, a perfect addition in that wide receiver room. They had some nice depth along the line of scrimmage on that defensive line in Phillip Bleedy, Isaiah Rakes. I'm a big fan of what Auburn has done too. I'd probably put them in as a winner as well. But as we sit right now, those are kind of the three teams that I think really have won the portal window. And then the three teams that I think probably haven't done what a lot of fans wanted to see in that transfer portal window. Again, a lot subject to change. We'll continue to talk about it as it plays out. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. And we'll talk to y'all later.